disturbed me that marketing was, or channels was being pushed to the side. I did a list, or I did a web search on the AMA, the American Marketing Association website, and I did a search for the word place, and it came up 247 in the listing of the most looked at things on the AMA website. Back then, everybody, well, not just back then, but for 20 or 30 years, consumer behavior is dominant, and it has been ever since we stole the idea from psychology. The first consumer behavior classes were in the late 70s, but I still like channels, and I thought it was a vital, important component of marketing. And little did I realize, while I was having my own little personal war trying to say that this was important, that something as brilliant as the omni-channel was going to come along, which shook everything up. And as I've said before, I have 3 classes in channels now in undergraduate. They're always full. If I had a 4th class, it would fill up as well. Channels is a hot subject now, all right? Place has a place. And a lot of that has to do, of course, with the omni-channel, but also I can say this, is that we have done just about everything else to death. We have done product to death. We have done promotion to death. We have done price to death. And the last great frontier is place. Now, one of the reasons that makes place so difficult is, as I said yesterday, is place is the most expensive, and it takes the longest to make changes. And so if you're making major changes with your channels, it involves many more individuals and many more functions than any of the others, and maybe all of the others put together. I don't know, all right? Having said that, channels, if you look at it right now, you can understand just how vital it is. So let me just roll this up just for a second, and I'll come back again. And I promise you, I'll put that back so it's not so fuzzy. So, in marketing channels, we have 4 components. We have the producer or the manufacturer at the top. We have the intermediaries in the middle, and then the consumer is at the very end, all right? Now, the great middle of here, the intermediaries, are the great conundrum of different specialists and generalists who work within the system. Now, so do I have any supply chain majors? Okay, supply chain, cool. Did you ever take my class yet, or did you take? You're out before you got into before we integrated, right?
I don't think I ever had.
Okay, that's cool. I'm not offended. Okay, so here's the difference. All right, here's the difference between supply chain and channels of distribution. Okay, supply chain believes that you start with raw materials, sub-assemblies, and finished goods. And the purpose is to expedite the movement down through the marketing channel system. It is known as the concept of push, all right? And so what push means is that every stage from up or down to bottom is a stage in which you push the goods through the system all the way through. And so the producers and the manufacturers, they have their own manufacturing agents or salespeople. They sell to the intermediaries, who might be wholesalers and retailers. The wholesalers and the retailers have their own agents. Their own agents go to retail, and then ultimately the retailer pushes it down to the consumer. Now, let me also say this: in the supply chain, the consumer doesn't exist. All right. In marketing channels, we think of it as the demand channel. All right. We believe that all of the major functions that occur in the supply chain system happen because the consumer demands those goods And because the consumer demands them, the goods are pulled through the system. Now, the truth is that supply chain and marketing channels are synergistic. They work together, all right? It's a wonderful combination. And to have both of them together is what breeds success. So how does the pull system work? The producers and the manufacturers, what they do is they advertise directly to the consumer. The consumer desires these products, and the consumer asks their intermediaries for those particular goods, and the goods are pulled through the system. And the truth is they work together. Now, this kind of gives you an idea of all of the fascinating abilities. Remember, once again, marketing is context driven, as Jack said. And so as the consumer shifts, certainly the shifts in demands in the supply chain are twisted and pulled by what happens here. And because the demand happens here, this is what happens to poor, helpless intermediaries that are trying to compensate. Remember, I said that channels of distribution are the most expensive and the most difficult to change. It can kind of give you an idea of the stretching and breaking that happens in the supply chain when the consumer's demands change, okay? Now, one more thing, a way that we are unique as opposed to the supply chain. Supply chain's core focus tends to be on the promotion of the goods moving through the system, ultimately coming to the consumer, and the transformation of those goods in the way. Marketing channels concerns itself with the organizations and the individuals that work in the system. And so the focus of marketing channels is the people, all right? The focus of marketing channels is the people who create, promote, and run the chain. And so there you have, in a nutshell, the strategic focuses of supply chain and the strategic focuses of marketing. We both have half of the coin, and together we provide a success to our customers.
Okay, a good thing to talk about for our case analysis.
Damn right, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, just think about what goes on in here, okay? Which I have chosen a case.
Yeah, just LG.
So LG is an interesting one, a very fascinating one, because LG has a lot of the machinations that are going on within, you know, their movement and promotion. LG is a fascinating corporation. LG has always been the, I don't know if you want to call it the lesser cousin to Samsung, and yet LG has made so many right moves in its environment. LG, when it decided, they were basically had the first real, what's the word I want to have? They had the first real good functional high definition televisions, and Samsung was a month or two behind them. And LG wanted to decide where they were going to distribute their goods. This is a classic channel question. And what LG decided to do was to give exclusive dealership for 2 years to Walmart, okay? And for 3 years, LG was the #1 seller of consumer electronics from I believe from 2008 to 2006 to 2009. That's an example of making a channel choice that can make or break you, okay? Yes, channel choices is also, if any of you use the Steel case, which is a brilliant case as well, okay? Steel is one of the very unique products out there. Steel uses a series of independent dealerships instead of home improvement centers, I don't call them hardware stores. And one of the choices in the steel is whether or not to move to Lowe's or Home Depot. And it's a great discussion in there. Okay? All right. So let us move on. Oops, sorry. Let me roll that down again. So with this little preamble that I gave, let us go to the official definition of marketing channels. Now, right off the top, the first time you look at the sentence, marketing channel is a set of interdependent organizations that participate in the process of making a product or service available for consumption. And that is, in a nutshell, what marketing channel is. It is a series of both independent and interdependent organizations as well, because success requires cooperation. But it also recognizes that other than in a vertical market system, is that each one of these organizations are independent. Now, I want you to think about that. If the organizations are independent, they each have their own purpose for being in existence. Every organization does. The purpose for Walmart's existence is not the same as Target. The purpose for GM Financial is not the same as modern Toyota. Each organization has their own reason for existence, which means that in order to have any channel success, there has to be some kind of commonality that brings cooperation. Sometimes, no, not sometimes, you find conflict in those, you find the use and maybe even the abuse of power in those organizations. All of those things are reasons why channels is such an amazing part of marketing and why we're at here today. Now, as I said before, we start off with the top, with the manufacturer, the producer. You can also, whatever you want to call them, they are the individuals that are at the very top. Now, the middle part are intermediaries. The intermediaries can be merchants, they can be wholesalers, they can be retailers, they can be specialized intermediaries, but all of them are facilitators to the process. And the last is, and the one that we consider to be part of the channel system, is the consumer. And this is another difference between us and supply chain. The consumer is in our channel system. Why? Because the consumer performs certain channel functions. The consumer performs certain channel functions. So what do I mean? In the 60s, it was not uncommon, absolutely normal, in fact, that you never got out of your car when you went to a gas station. So in essence, you would pull up to a gas station and someone would pump your gas, clean your windshield, and then you would go on. In the 70s, at the advent of the gas crisis and the reduction in oil from OPEC, there needed to be a way of cutting the customer a break. And you had the advent of self-service gas stations. That was the beginning. And so what it meant was that in terms of deliverable, the things that you would do, because of that, the consumer was given a break on gasoline prices. In essence, the consumer was paid for performing a function normally performed by an intermediary. And if you look through history, there are many, many other examples of this as well. So if you go into Costco or Sam's Club, you'll buy enormous sizes of goods. You will buy those sizes at a break, maybe 5 to 10%, and you will bring them home, and you're going to perform the channel process known as breaking bulk. In other words, you'll take those apart, okay? Put them into smaller instances, and you save the money that it would have taken for someone at the store to perform that. And so that's, all of those reasons come together is why the consumer is part of the channel functions. Okay. So the overall process, the deciding choice that a company makes in the channels that they employ is known as the channel system. Steel Tools uses a series of 8,500 independent dealers who have their own reasons for existence, as opposed to go to a franchise or a corporation such as Lowe's or Home Depot. And that is the reasons why they employ it the way they do. Along with that, as I just talked about in the push and pull strategy, is whether or not the corporation does substantial amount of advertising directly to the consumer, and the consumer pulls the goods through, and that's a pull strategy, versus products that are manufactured, and those goods that are manufactured are showed off to intermediaries as a particular good that consumers would wish to buy. So I went to Badcock, bad plan, and I happened to see there what was called a pub table. It stood about this big, and it had stools that actually hung from the table itself. It had like this inlet there. And there was one table that had 4 of them, and it would have been perfect to put in our, whatever we want to call it, our family room, because we need to move all the stuff that our girls have accumulated that they do crafts with and put it in this one place. And it was sold right out from under my arms. And I have been obsessively looking for a 5-piece pub table with hung stools, and it is driving me, okay? This is an example of a consumer demand that makes the pull system possible. Somewhere out there, there's a product manufacturer who made those. I don't know who, and I'm gonna go back to Badcock and say, come on, cough it up, who did it? Who just basically, they bought those things. And this is what the guy at Badcock said, well, they just bought it. You know, it's not part of our normal dealerships. We went to a show and we just bought it, all right? And that was a push thing, okay? So the push strategy versus the pull strategy, look at it from both ends, and both are important in order to achieve some form of success. What you find, however, especially in the world as it is today, is that you need to have more than one marketing channel to reach customer segments in a single market area. And this is what's called this multi-channel marketing. The omni-channel is what I talked about before, and to explain the omni-channel, I need to kind of show another one of my silly slides to try to give you an idea. And this is the one that I chose to give you an idea just what the multi-channel and the omni-channel is. The multi-channel states that there are many channels available to the consumer, but those channels are not integrated together. And so if I'm online on the internet using my PC and I order on the PC and I receive goods on the PC, that's an example of multi-channel marketing. Each individual item is available to me as a consumer to be able to use, but each one of these is what's considered siloed. In other words, they don't touch each other. But what we were looking for to bring them all together is the mobile phone. And the mobile phone is the key in the heart of the omni-channel, because all of the channels are available to the consumer, and the consumer does what's called channel pollution. They'll start out going online, ordering something, they'll pick it up in the store, they might go to the store, order it, and have it come to their home. They might order it online, they may call up on the phone and pick up in the store, and this is what the omni-channel is. It is a gathering place of both research, ordering, and delivery, all in a single place, where the channels have gone integrated, merged together, where you can't tell which one is which. So I'll give you an idea of what the omni-channel is. I go online, so my 75-inch television that I bought, okay? So I did extensive research, and that's one of the things that the omni-channel provides us, is it provides us a conduit for one of the important channel functions, and that's information. So I went through looking at them all, trying to find the correct ones, looking at who possibly could deliver it to me. And then finally, I couldn't stand it to be able to see exactly what I was going to buy. And I went to Walmart to buy it. Buying it at Walmart, I also allowed Walmart to deliver it to my house, which I could do it by ordering it online via Walmart. This guy was so awesome. He delivered the TV, carried it in for me, helped me, and made sure it was unboxed safely. And he didn't have any of that. And yet that is an example of success when we're talking about the omnichannel, okay? The blurring together, the starting online, the going into the store, all of these blurring of the lines of the channels are difficult to track, and knowing exactly which one does the most is a very uncertain kind of future. But why do we have the omni-channel? Remember this. Consumers who use more than one channel system purchase more. It's as simple as that. Consumers who purchase in more than one channel system purchase more. That's why we do it. And then once again, the amazing thing about consumers, I talked about buy online, pick up in store. The consumer buys online now, and instead of waiting for those goods to be delivered to his house, which you might think, they actually want to go in the store and pick it up themselves. And as I said before, the difficulty with retail establishments is that it generally costs anywhere from 10 to 15% more for that particular good, because one individual has to pull it off the store. Off the shelves and store it someplace. And so what you find, it's either called BUPUS or BOP, whichever one you care. The consumer, now what they're doing is giving substantial discounts, because once they're in the store, because they use mixed channels, the possibility of them buying more is increased. So you got to roll with the punch, okay? So now here's another thing about channels. Channels can be target segmented just like everything else. In other words, you can create a channel segmentation that is targeted for a particular consumer. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's see if I can do this. And I'll probably get a couple of commercials along the way. Okay, let's see. This is it. So let me first turn off the sound. Okay, it started right out. Okay, now I want you to watch this commercial. And I want you to see the signals that it's giving to you because it's telling you who this particular channel is for. All right, let's see if I can do this without blowing your drums. What's happening? It's the future, Michael. Well, I'm not Michael.
I don't worry, he calls everyone Michael.
Okay, Easter egg. That's Sam Walton's original truck. That's the one he built Walmart with, driving all over the United States. Okay, so what were the symbols that you saw there? What kind of cars did you see? Right, and like what were the movies? Which ones did they come from? What? Back to the Future, Transformers, Fred Flintstone,
Knight Rider?
Knight Rider, very good. Scooby-Doo.
Family Vacation?
Yeah, you're in that. What are we talking about in terms of eras? You know, when were those?
Wasn't it like in the movie?
Yes, exactly. This is 80s and 90s stuff. And it's there for a reason because guess what? You're now grown, okay? And so what would be the most functional use of sitting in your car and having somebody put your groceries in your car? Yes, that's it, okay? So this is an example of where channels have been segmented, all right? So this is like a great classic commercial. I love this because it shows that channels can be segmented both demographically and even psychographically as well, okay? So, very good, got it. Okay. What you hope for is an integrated marketing channel system where all of those are working together in some coordinated fashion. But the speculation I always have is that channels are very messy and difficult and can get a certain sense of it. But to know whether it's truly effective or not, there's really only one way, and that is to find ultimately whether your revenues are higher, okay? So what you're hoping to create is what this is called the value network. And the value network is when corporations look upon each other as cooperative individuals with alliances and partnerships that help to bring greater offerings to their particular corporations. So one of Walmart's great partnerships is with Procter & Gamble. And Procter & Gamble was long courted by Walmart. And in a mutual cooperation, Procter & Gamble and Walmart have worked functionally very well together. We'll talk about the ways that they have been able to handle difficulties later. But what this comes down to is that when mutually satisfying kinds of partnerships, you have this ability to gain greater good for your consumers. So the interesting thing about Apple, and I've talked about Apple before, is they have a mutual love-hate relationship with Samsung. Samsung makes 3 of the important chips inside of the iPad, and yet when Steve Jobs was the head, they brought Samsung to court multiple times over licensing and plagiarism, all right? What you hope to have is this kind of mutual success, this growing success and being able to put together partnerships that make everybody happy. So I just talked a little bit about the digital channels revolution. I would maybe even call it evolution, that it was eventual. And the thing about also the omnichannel, and I've studied enough of this, nobody thought of it up, all right? It just happened. Consumers started their way, and they were working along the given pathway. And what happens so many times is that companies must adjust, otherwise they lose what's happening. Walmart, to their very credit, has adjusted and succeeded. Walmart in 2015 bought Jet.com, which was a dynamic search engine for purchased goods, looking at price cutting. And they made the head of Jet.com their CIO, their chief information officer, or it might have been internet officer, I can't remember what it was. Walmart then went on a buying spree. They bought shoes.com, which is the biggest retailer in shoes. They bought moosejaw.com, which is a big outfitter for outdoor equipment. They bought the Indian equivalent of Google, and they augmented their own website, and that has made them very successful. And as I've said before, Walmart succeeds in many ways because they have found a successful way to integrate their channel systems into so much success that corporations copy Walmart. Once again, it's very difficult to keep a strategic advantage, especially if it has already been done. If it's a unique property like Apple and their loyalty and their design, that's very difficult because if you follow Apple's design too close, you get sued. But corporations have found the Walmart model to be very successful, and they follow it whenever they can. So, what are the functions that channels do? Well, the first one is information. And information may be the most important function that you find in the channel environment. When people look at this, they're kind of surprised because they think of channels as just goods flowing back. No. It's the flows go back and forth. There are many different things. The first is to gather information. And that flows up and down the system. It is a two-way flow. Advertising is strictly a downward flow. And so it starts at the top and goes to the bottom. And it is everything that integrated marketing communication is. The next one is a two-way flow all the way down to the consumer, and it's extremely important, and it's negotiation. I've said it more than once in a different context. Negotiation may be the most important skill that you ever come up with and acquire, and I never got it well enough. But also what that means is in negotiations, financing as well. Financing is such a key critical component of channels that modern systems simply could not exist. Ordering goes both up and down. And the financing, if you notice, that's what that other bullet point is. You cannot have a channel system without risk. And the ability to negotiate risk may be the most key of all, because there's always a risk, no matter what. If you were smart enough to buy 100,000 board feet of lumber before the prices went crazy, you're assuming the risk that you could inventory them successfully and not worry about pilfering. And that's what that successive storage and movement of physical products is. The movement of storage, or excuse me, physical products is also under the heading of logistics. And the last is physical possession and ownership. And they are separate, the physical possession of goods and ownership. Can you think of a circumstance where you can have something but not own it? If you go down King Street, you're going to go to a consignment store. And what a consignment store is that one individual owns the store, and the goods in the store are actually owned by someone else. And so they put their goods in the consignment store because it is a gathering place of individuals to see their goods. The consignment store runs the transaction for those individuals. They send the money to whoever actually owned that, and they keep a percentage as a take for doing the processing and everything like that. And so the consignment store, they own the store, but none of the goods inside. You'd be surprised, Walmart may be the largest consignment store in the world. Many of the goods in Walmart are never paid for until the consumer actually buys them. And then what Walmart does is net 45 instead of net 30. Now they always pay, but they pay 15 days later. And if you ask what good does that do, just think of floating $15 billion for 15 extra days. And it kind of gives you an idea that they're making money off the money. Okay. All right. So this is kind of the flows if you're looking. So there's the physical flow, and then there's the ownership as it moves through. Then if you notice, payment flows backwards, information flows upwards and backwards in every direction, and promotion flows in just one way, all right? If it starts with the suppliers, it moves through, then it's push. But if the suppliers go all the way to the customers and the customers have demand, that's pull, okay? Information, payment, and financing, like I've said before, is so critically important that you have no idea. Let's see. We're going to tell a quick story and then we'll take a break. So, you ever wonder when you look out at modern Subaru and modern Toyota, how they can possibly have 100 or 200 cars out there? There must be $2, $3, $4 million of inventory out there. Along with maintaining those ridiculous buildings, how are they able to pay for the parts? Well, this is how it happens. First, they have the dealership. Their dealership or their corporation requires that they buy a certain number of those cars every month. Let's just say 40, for lack of. I know actually smaller ones. I know one in Andalusia, Alabama, that I happened to talk to the sales guy, and he sells 45 cars a month online now. And I mean, that just gives you an idea. So I've got to do these 100 cars in a month. How am I going to do it? So what happens is the franchise owner of Modern Subaru calls GM Financial. Now, Westinghouse is another one. They're financing corporations, and that's all they do. Matter of fact, GM Financial may be the strongest arm of GM right now. So they say, I need to buy 100 cars. It's going to cost $2 million. GM Financial says, I'll cut you a check. And so they cut a check for $2 million transferred now. They do $2 million and they send it to Subaru corporate. And so that pays for the automobiles. By the way, of course, you know that these are franchises, so you're never buying directly from Subaru or from Toyota, that you're buying the cars from the franchise dealerships themselves. So those 100 cars get to Modern Toyota. So in the space of the month, let's say they sell 50 of them, which means there's 50 remaining. At the end of the month, Modern Toyota cuts a check to GM Financial to pay for 50 of those cars. And then they cut a second check on the interest of the remaining 50. So they pay the monthly interest on those 50 cars, and then they hold them over into inventory until eventually they can be sold. All right. So that's the modern world, the way it works. And without companies like Westinghouse and GM financing to finance these big, gigantic, we think big, gigantic, this is a little boom. Just think about other places where they're spending impossible amounts of money. It all happens because they are what's known as a specialized intermediary, which is financing. They do not take physical possession or ownership of any of the goods, but without them as a specialized intermediary, you could not facilitate the transfer from one channel to another. All right, let's go take our regular 10-minute break. We have a couple of days to finish this, and we'll probably flow into Wednesday to finish this, and then we'll finish on Thursday. So take a break. We'll be back in 10.
For what? How long is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do one or the other.
Just make the presentation 30%.
Yeah,
And then just,
yeah.
right, just make it all. Some classes where everything is kind of like all of a sudden. Officers, like project, some at night, so he has time to grade them. But people don't present until that mindset, the following week, right? And if it's this morning, it's like, hey, so I present on Wednesday, but it says it's due on Sunday. So the test is maybe on Sunday. And it's like saying, that's it. Also, friends, I don't know what they're like, what's called very science or exercise science. And they have their final schedule for August 8th, like the whole summer session. And then they just changed it, just changed it. I was like, yeah, it's going to be the best time to get it has to be the 5th or whatever. I'm waiting for the last week for that one. And the whole movement situation, we always figure out things with better apartments, moving days.
I think that's fun for fun. Thursday? Okay. I mean, mean, it's the last day, but at least. I'm trying to give you the sour thing. I don't, oh god, that is sour.
To warhead, nice.
Well, I can't do it.
It's sour for like a real short period, and it's really sweet. Just gotta get through that coating. Just fight through it, it'll get sweet.
No, I
Fight
can't.
through it, fight through it. At least the one goes in.
It's like a freaking lemon. Thing. I like to like, was that the awesome? Yeah, it was the dentistry club put on a 5K. So then must do it and stuff, yeah. Well then, I like to like have mints or whatever. Like stuff on, I feel like it helps me concentrate. Is there like a reason that when you chew a different flavor of gum for every class, and you chew that same gum when you study, you remember what you did in class? You're just on top. Yeah, because you always have gum.
It's called state-dependent memory.
There you go.
You can also do that with music.
Music is
Yeah.
Typically, when I study for an exam that I know is going to be hard,
Mhm.
I'll listen to the same album over and over and over again, and then listen to it on the way to.
Yeah, that's smart. I like to study the classical. I like rainforest music. Like if I have to read, I like rainforest music, but I can't listen to like lyrics and read it sometimes. Which poems is like maybe a verse. Are we ready for accounting tomorrow? I'm scared. Yeah. We just introduced so much yesterday and then we still have today.
Have you done any of the variant stuff?
Huh?
Have you done any of the variant stuff?
Yeah, I watched the videos.
I've been trying to do a thing without having done that.
You mean the price variance?
Yeah, I could not do it. I watched his, like, the last 2 videos on chapter 7, help me finish, like, the whole last homework thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the last one takes a while. I'm gonna be working on it. Before it's counted.
Oh my God, I have to finish this. And this one, guys.
Today? Yeah,
It's gonna take 2 hours to read if you want to read the whole thing.
yeah. How long is y'all?
35 pictures.
Oh, you did fix seal?
Now we did electronics.
Uh,
I think steel was long too,
yeah, it is.
but again, then we'll have a ton of information.
I just trying to call my doctor's office because I'm supposed to have a doctor's appointment this month. And I forgot what day it is. Normally someone will text mine and I haven't got someone text mine. So I just called them. They're closed today, but it's Tuesday. No, sometimes it's not.
Oh,
So I probably missed it.
Actually, it's just 21 pages because the last 5 are.
nice.
Mhm.
I mean, are we realistically, we're going to practice a presentation if I just go and fix that.
You can put your name on the slide on the side if you want to do it. Put it in the comments.
Do we already have slides picked out?
No, I just put them on the Google slide and showed it without based off the,
What kind of
template.
what kind of company is it?
When do you guys want to meet?
That kind of
Sounds like we need to meet. Definitely don't have time to use.
Electronic
We
billboards.
do our part.
Okay.
We don't really talk about it.
Just pick what slide you want to do and just
Well,
put your name in
there's-
the comments.
We need to start.
And I'm gonna
I'll-
ask him if we
Maybe
can
someone
not
can
do
build
that
one
feature
that-
and
The
just
template's
share it.
already, the template's already made.
I'm gonna
We already made it.
slide template. and
Well,
send
then we
you
just
guys.
need to assign parts.
I'll pick out a slide
Yeah.
template. and
You're
send
like
you
the
guys.
only one that
You basically.
I'm probably not gonna
Out the-
look at it until after this.
Okay.
That's fine. We only have 6 cities, so just read and it's already flooding out.
So you're cool to start at like tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I'm all right.
I'm a pretty quick writer,
We do.
so it's just making sure I know what we need to write.
Mhm.
Did you just start the summer?
I'm in the MBA program so far. I have to write 15-page papers for my finals.
I'll say the whole semester is a lot easier than that.
I think it's
The first time I really,
Yeah.
I don't like mine was when I was selling it to management. I feel like I think quite a few things to do.
It's time to, if you want to do good, it's time to do
Yeah.
What class?
strategic management.
The finance.
Oh, you guys had that with,
Is it?
Luke?
Stephen Creed.
No.
No, Stephen.
No, I'm talking about like.
Is it like the same as like what you do in undergrad?
It's exactly. But then it
Don't use to.
That's what you do by yourself.
I don't,
Oh, you
But
did
see,
it by
I had
yourself.
it
Yeah,
easy.
but you
I
did
have
it.
a group of 5.
you didn't do.
I had to do my whole like first thing in like a week.
Oh, wait, yeah, well, I was a day behind you. Yeah, for a while.
And I think mine's still better than some of the recent ones.
Yours was good.
Just to change the color of the grass to actually be their color. The rest of it was copy and
Yeah,
paste.
I was happy.
Before we
Do you
start
have a
that,
motorcycle?
Me,
Yeah.
used to,
What kind of motorcycle?
had a Honda 754. I love that car.
I don't have one right
bike,
now.
man. What's that?
Probably have one right now.
You can't see, man. I'm gonna get, you know, no, I've become very mindful of my own physical being now that I'm worth more, you know,
Yeah.
so.
Well, it's gonna take all those channel classes. I mean,
Yeah, right. Nobody wants it, 'cause, you know, they gave me, I'm also the director of executive education, which means I could actually have a course release. So university professors here in business teach 3 courses. Usually it's what's called a 3 and 2. So you'll teach 2 different classes, but 2 sections of another class, okay? I'm doing a 4 and 2. So I'm teaching 3 sections of channels and then 1 graduate course in the fall, which gives me 2 over, what's the word I want to use? Overfills. In other words, I'm doubly overfilling. I should only be teaching 2 classes and I'm teaching 4, but no, I love to teach, you know? I mean, seriously. So it doesn't bother me. Yeah, I used to ride a bike. Well, I love that Honda. I mean, it was as smooth as glass. I mean, you could drink a glass of milk on it without spilling.
what about chocolate milk?
Not often.
Does Dr. Allison still teach, research, market research?
Yes, she does. And she still teaches at 8 o'clock in the morning, and God knows why. She has, yeah, she's a killer professor. She teaches 8 o'clock classes.
I had it for market research, but not at 8 a.m.
Oh, really?
But yeah, that was a good class. It was my last semester.
Oh, good, good. I'll make sure she knows that. She actually, it's kind of funny how our classes, she has been originally hired to teach international marketing, but she hasn't gone near international marketing. And then she also was supposed to teach consumer behavior, never got near that. She was teaching IMC, and then she kind of backed into marketing research when one of our teachers passed away, and that's kind of been her thing. And the same person who passed away was also teaching marketing channels, and that's why I'm teaching it. So I was originally teaching principles, which I like principles because you get a good mix of students. And I taught IMC, which is not my thing. I taught marketing analytics, and I would have been happy to teach research, but man, when channels kind of fell in, it's mine, and I don't want anybody else to have it. So, and I guess it's because I have not just the experience, but I have a true enjoyment of working in channels as well. Channels to me, and this is my own personal feeling, is it has the greatest connection to individuals, all right? It requires you to be a negotiator. It means that you can't just simply bull your way through. You have to find ways of making disparate groups work together. And I was in retail and I was in a wholesaler. I've done all of those things. And it's just, to me, a very dynamic field. If you go into supply chain or if you go into those, it's a great field to be in. So what are the channel levels? So we talk about these levels here, and what they basically mean is how many intermediaries does it take ultimately to be able to get to the consumer. So when you're measuring the levels, you're measuring the number of intermediaries that are in the system. So a zero channel level is consumer direct. So you're talking directly one-on-one to the consumer. And usually you find that the interesting part is that direct marketing still plays in. Direct marketing used to be mail order. Then direct marketing created their magic on the home shopping networks. And now, of course, direct marketing is all of those things and the internet as well. So the 1, 2, 3 intermediaries, if you're trying to measure them, examples could be, and this is possible. So you could have a manufacturer here, you could have a wholesaler here, you could actually have a supply warehouse here, then you have the retailer here, and then finally you have the consumer here. So the way that you count this is you take these out, and these are the intermediaries, and the retailer and the wholesaler are both considered intermediaries, and then this would be called a 3-channel system. So what do I mean by suppliers or logistics? There are corporations that do nothing but warehouse goods and move goods from one place to another. They're what are known as 3PLs, or third-party logistics. They are corporations that have no other process. They're specialized intermediaries other than taking the goods and moving from one location to the next. Reverse flow systems are those systems that take those items that can be recycled and send them back up to the manufacturer so that they can be cycled again. I'm not going to worry about the channel systems. You kind of get how all of this works. Wholesalers to retailers, 2-level, 3-level systems. Industrials, I'm not worried about those right now. So we'll just pass and move on. So what are the channel decisions, and what are some of the deliverables that channels bring? So the first is the desired lot size. In other words, breaking bulk. How far do we split the onion to where consumers find them desirable? Now, one of the key interesting components of this is that the smaller we make goods, the more bite-sized we make the goods, the greater value the consumers consider them to be. And so we're going to go to Hungry Mother, which is a state park in Virginia, in 2 weeks. And along the way, we have a big bottle of Palmolive, which we're not going to bring, but we're going to bring this little bottle of Palmolive with us to do 3 days of work. And if you go into the store, the little bottle of Palmolive costs the same as the big bottle. Well, why? Because it is a more exact desired lot size that consumers want. So one of the other functions that companies do is in breaking a bulk is especially, let's look at mom and pop stores. So I'm going to give you another thing here. So we'll look at alcohol. We'll look at candy. And we'll look at cigarettes, all the reasons to exist. Okay? Now, when manufacturers produce these goods, and they put them together in lot sizes. Their lot sizes are what are known as skids. Okay, so they have this giant pallet, and these pallets are picked up by forklifts, and this is how they sell those goods. Well, we have a series of small mom and pop retailers down here, and each one of these mom and pops can't buy in those sizes, can't do it. However, what they have is they have one independent wholesaler who buys from all three of these people, break those up into smaller bite size that the mom and pops can absorb. And then ultimately the mom and pops can sell them into consumers at individual sizes. And this is one of the main primary functions that channels do, is they break these goods up into desirable sizes that each channel environment can deem acceptable. And remember, as I said, the consumer is part of the channel system, so they break down further to further to further. And that's how it works, okay? Small mom and pops could not exist without wholesalers who do all the sim things for them and put them in the sizes that they can take. Waiting and delivery time. Now, the interesting thing about waiting and delivery time is sometimes you want to wait. So you have no problem waiting when you're trying to install an open MRI into a hospital, which is amazing, folks. If you've ever seen it, I've actually seen them move an MRI in. They got giant doors and it's like crazy. It's $1 million machines. But there are some organizations and some corporations in which delivery time, money is no object. And so an example of that, I worked in the oil field in Louisiana. And we had customers like Shell and Kerr-McGee. And I don't know if you know this, but oil companies do not own anything. They rent or lease the property that they're drilling on, and they rent or lease the drilling platforms that they use. And so the drilling platforms are owned by corporations like Hipaa and Halliburton and those kind of, and they charge something to the effect of $400,000 a day to do the drilling. Now, imagine one hose breaking and them having to wait 8 hours to get it. You get an idea that money is no object to get those items out there. And so in the oil field industry, their 3PLs, their third-party logistics providers, are what are called hotshots. And so hotshots are corporations that get goods from A to B in as little time as possible, no matter how many tickets they got to pick up in order to get there. And so that's an example of waiting and delivery time. Spatial convenience means that you buy it in most simply the most convenient place. And those also are connected, folks, if you remember, with our product classifications. And so goods that are considered convenience goods need to be purchased in the most convenient place available. And because you're purchasing convenience, price is secondary. If you go into one of the convenience stores to go get a 20-ounce Coke, you're going to find that 20-ounce Coke is more expensive than a 1-liter bottle that's across the street at Lowe's. And so spatial convenience means exactly what it sounds like. It's usually the shortest convenient space. Variety means the variety for those particular consumers in balance with the convenience. And so one of the unique things about the Dollar General, and I've said before, the variety of the store is around 85 to 80% of the things that you would normally find in Walmart in terms of what are called fast-moving consumer goods. You're not going to find any televisions in there, all right? But what you do find is that if you can't find that exact thing that you can find in a Walmart, you're going to find something similar to that in the Dollar General. And there's where spatial convenience and product variety are sufficient. Now, let me also say this, is that the most variety, if you're going to find it in any single location, is going to be in your supermarkets. So supermarkets contain anywhere from 50,000 to 152,000 different separate items, their product mix, which is amazing when you think about it. 150,000 different items and sizes of all of those things. And, you know, our modern stores like that, if you are willing to step back and think about the complexity of that and this constant ballet that goes on every day to make sure the stores or the shelves are filled, kind of gives you an idea of what happens to the channels when just one thing breaks down. And so when that one thing breaks down, it's not surprising that you have shortages. So the interesting thing about Corona when it came along was the lack of toilet paper. And the truth of that also is that it wasn't directly connected with hoarding. Even though hoarding was the most visible sign, the shortages came up for a different reason. So in March of 2020, what did they tell everybody to do? No, they were like, stay inside, stay home. And so what lockdown meant was that instead of you being at your businesses where you normally are, your predominant time during the day, that 8 hours is being spent at home versus being at your office. Now, if you ever go to warehouse or ever locations like that, okay, we're going to talk about desired lot sizes right now. When toilet paper is produced, it's produced in two ways: residential and commercial, all right, or industrial, if you want to say. So when you sell industrial sized toilet papers, you're not going to buy the little roll like that. You're going to get the roll that's, the size of a manhole cover, all right? And the difficulty with that is that consumers were not using the toilet paper at their office, they were using the toilet paper at home. And then the shift of demand created what was called the bullwhip effect, because everything got wonky, all right? And it was not easy, or as you might think, to be able to transfer those back and forth. And so that's an example, okay, of product variety being in the wrong place and desired lot size at the same time. The last service backup, you don't think of service as channels, but absolutely it is. Any service on any existing equipment, well, new or pre-existing equipment, service is considered to be a channel function. It's a unique one because we're talking about delivery, installation, credit, all of those repairs. And what this is the key that if you're a corporation that is battling corporations that are similar to yours, that is the way that you can be unique and better than others. If my service is superior, if I'm willing to install the product for the consumer, maybe at a price, but maybe not. If I'm willing to provide the financing in such a way that it makes it easier for the consumer to get there, then all of those things create greater value and benefit to the consumer itself. And so these are, if you consider the 4 Ps as levers that marketing uses to be able to perform their strategies, these are the manipulations that you can to design channels to provide the consumers with what they want.
You talked about MRI machines.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about like salesmen itself?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us about it?
Oh, medical equipment is, so medical, it depends on who you're selling with, but medical component system sales is usually straight commission, all right? And salespeople who have direct commission are the highest paid salespeople in the business, all right? MRIs, now here's the other thing about selling, in the medical office system environment is because many of those requirements are also generated by government regulation, all right? So the Hipaa Act of 2006 changed everything. It required individuals to be able to keep and report records, but also in a more private way as well. It's affected a lot of things. Those, let me find a way of putting it. Those medical systems that are considered options are the most prized of all. And those are the ones that medical salespeople do the best on. So an open MRI, anybody ever had an MRI? Gone down the channel and had it? Okay. So you know what it's like. You're sitting inside and wham, 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 that kind of thing. Open MRIs was the coming thing. And it wasn't unusual for salespeople. Now think about it, you're having to sell generally to hospitals, all right? And that's generally where they first started. If I am a corporation that is making open MRIs and I have a certain number of things that I want to sell, am I only going to try to sell the hospitals? Right. I'm going to try to sell the clinics if I can. And so salespeople, all right, have started making those sales flow. Selling medical equipment is like the promised land if you can do that, okay? But it's also very difficult in terms of getting there. It requires you to have distinct knowledge about the medical profession. I'll give you, here's one. And I was reading an article on this. This is gross. Medical salespeople who sell equipment to separate and spread bones. So the saws that they use to open the chest are very specialized. And I have even heard of doctors who need the salespeople to tell them how to properly operate the saws, all right? So if you're a medical professional and you're selling those things, the chances are one day you might have to step inside a surgery and tell a doctor the proper way to hold it, all right? That's a true story, all right? Does that answer some of the questions? It's a great place to be, and it's never going away, especially with the graying of America. So there's always going to be a place. It just depends on whether it's, you know.
Yeah, I just imagine it's really hard to sell like MRIs because one huge hospital maybe has two of them.
Right, exactly. And that's why you see open MRIs, which has been a new thing, starting to be done in rural areas and clinics that work around an entire area. I was working with, in that same direction, I have a friend of mine who's an audiologist in San Diego. They're working with someone in North Carolina, and they're talking about doing clinic work for hearing tests for individuals in rural areas. And the difficulty with that is that clinicians are a very small breed. There's not many out there. And so a viable solution is a clinic on wheels that you can send anywhere in a given area with all of the necessary equipment with a given clinicians, but they have to have trained audiologists to actually look at the graphs, and those are beamed to one audiologist in a given location. The entire medical field has changed substantially with remote monitoring. And so it's a good business to be in, but yeah, when you're talking about selling big equipment, all right, anything that's a big piece of equipment, it requires you to have an expertise in that field and knowledge that you're just not going to simply walk in and get, all right? You have to fight for those positions. I mean, not necessarily fight, but you have to prove yourself as a salesman in one form first before you can move up, all right? Most of medical selling is done in the pharmacy industry, but there's always going to be a place for medical equipment. You are. So you try to establish your objectives and your constraints with your locations. They have this picture of this Apple store. You have to have, what is your objective in your locations determines basically what kind of channels you use. Now, this is an Apple store. Apple stores were opened very grudgingly, but have been a gold mine. So Apple stores have the highest generated profit per square foot of any retail establishment in the world, and that includes diamond stores. All right. And they're paid, and their employees are paid salary. But they get to be called cool things like these. So the design of the store was actually going to be used purely as window dressing. In other words, they were going to use them as places where they were going to show off products and do proof models on how to go about doing advertising. And it turned out to be gold mines. And of course, Microsoft knows a good idea when they steal one, they open Microsoft stores too. And so establish your reason, your purpose, why you're going to want to have those places. And you also have to be able to adapt when things change as well. So each channel has to determine 3 alternatives. And we're going to go through these one at a time. This is Summer Hill. I had an uncle that worked at the NASA Mississippi Test Facility, and we won the science fair, and I was like 11 or 12, and my brother was with me. And he said, look, when you go inside and they ask you who you are, just say you're the Summer Hill. This was during the space race. So they're like, when are we going to get more engineers in there? We were dressed in our little white shirts and our clip-on ties. And, hey, Vernon, who's this? Oh, these are the Summer Hill. And they laughed. Okay. So first, we identify the number of intermediaries. What is going to be our distribution? Are we going to have exclusive distribution, which severely limits the number of intermediaries, which Apple does? Selective distribution, which relies on only some of the intermediaries to carry maybe certain products or product lines, or intensive distribution in as many outlets as possible. And once again, to answer this question, where are we going to send those goods? The answer for that is it depends on the product classification of our goods. If our goods are specialty goods, we are going to want to have some kind of exclusive distribution, because by its very nature, the expectation is you're only going to find it in certain places. Selective distribution, it can be in a select number of locations, exactly what it sounds like. And it is possible that those selected places may be in competition with each other. But by its very statement, what it is saying is that there's a choice in the distributors that they're going to use. And once again, I love the fact that there is a chainsaw here. And the chainsaw says, why is the world's #1 selling branded chainsaw not sold at Lowe's and Home Depot? And so the steel case is basically about distribution. And then finally, intensive distribution, of course, is with convenience items, fast-moving consumer goods, staples, and emergency goods that need to be in the closest possible location. which means the best way to figure it out is just put them everywhere. When they started putting drink things inside of automobile dealerships, I thought that was clever. And like I said, when I saw a Starbucks one there, I thought, man, that was smart. And the important thing to understand is that making these choices for channels, so much is wrapped up around the persona of the item that you're selling. It must be true to the product and the product classification. Otherwise, you make major mistakes when it comes to distributing those items. And the last thing you want to do is have intermediaries getting in a fight with each other. The next in also is around the classification is the terms and the responsibilities of the chapter members, of the channel members, excuse me. Is the good have a fixed price or what we call a suggested retail price? Do these resellers have the right to change that price? Now, the answer is in all cases, yes. But the suggestion retail price is just a suggestion. So the new Ford F-150 EV, I think the suggested retail on is like 60, 50, 65. They're selling it for 98. In the 80s, I'll never forget, there's a story in Jackson, Mississippi, where I lived. And they had just come out with their newest Corvette Stingray, and it was just a major uptick. And the listed price on it was, this is 1983, 84, suggested list on it was 50,000, and they were selling it at 125. And a Jackson bigwig bought one for 125, a black one. And that same day, he got a call from Eddie Murphy. And Eddie Murphy said, "You got my bet, and I won it." And the guy said, $200,000. And Eddie Murphy said, "I won't spend $1 over 175. And the guy said, so he made $50,000 in one day. Okay. Conditions of the sale. Do you get cash discounts? Do you get early payment plans? In other words, has anybody ever seen this? Do you know what that means? $210 and $30.
That's how long you take to pay back.
Right. And what does that mean? It means that if you pay within 10 days, you get a 2% discount. But if you can't, then the rest is 30. Net 30. Now, one thing also to realize in the conditions of the sales, realize this, that if a company allows you to go net 30, what they are in essence doing is allowing you to borrow that money and let you use it for 30 days before you ever give it to them. So if you owe someone $600 and you wait to the end of the month to pay, what they're actually saying is we'll finance that for 30 days, no matter what is happening with whatever's going on out there, and we're willing to let you keep that money until the end of that time, and then you pay me back. That is an amazing trust thing, okay? The next is distributor territory rights, which can be a very big turf war. Not only that, but especially if the goods are sold online, who gets credit in that territory for that particular sale? This is one of the issues that Callaway Clubs had. Callaway Clubs in 2007 started to sell their clubs online. If everybody knows anything about Callaway, they were practically match weapons. You actually got measured for your clubs to make sure that they were the right size. And then Callaway, what they did is started selling them online. And the first group that started screening were the pro shops. So pro shops are the places that sell goods that are connected to any golf course. And a substantial amount of their income is directly related to people coming in and buying those clubs. And so what Callaway had to do was find some way of satisfying everybody so that they were able to receive credits for those sales. And then finally, the duties and responsibilities and service has to be very carefully spelled out so that both the manufacturer and the intermediaries know where their turf is, where their rights and responsibilities are. Okay, I'm going to go, it's 15 minutes. So this next slide is going to be a big one. And you'll find these next concepts in what is known as leadership psychology. You find this in marketing channels. It dominated marketing channels in the 90s until finally the Journal of Marketing said, we're not going to publish a single paper anymore talking about, hold on, where is it? This is channels. Power. So, because these are intermediaries that are unlike each other, they have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. It means that each organization has its own strengths. And so given that, we have the concept that is known as power. So in 1992, Walmart started their VMS, it's called their vendor management system. And what Walmart required their vendors to do is buy expensive computer systems so that they could be tied 24/7 into Walmart, so that Walmart can be able to know exactly what's on the shelves of their vendors. So what did the vendors get for all of this rigmarole? The vendors got to see what was on every shelf in every Walmart, their products all over the world. It took the appropriate use of power to make the vendors do exactly what they needed to do. And so power is the potential for influence. It is the ability of A to influence B to move in a direction which A wishes them to move. Power's greatest success is when it provides system-wide advantages. In other words, it doesn't provide advantage to one member of the system. It provides advantages from the manufacturer all the way down to the consumer. And power with the potential of influence is extremely important, and power is used every day.
Greatest success one provides what?
When it provides system-wide advantages. In other words, when Walmart put their vendor management together and they forced their intermediaries to do this, the advantages were not just to Walmart, the advantages were to the entire system, okay? And not only that, but power usually only succeeds when everybody gets some kind of advantage out of it. So what the vendor management system did, it required all of these corporations to spend these tens of thousands of dollars. But what it did for the vendors is it gave them an enormously better management of their own material. Now, what it also did was it made Walmart introduce just in time to their vendor system. So it let the vendors, it made them keep their goods on their shelves and deliver them only when Walmart wanted them. But the vendors themselves also got to see what Walmart's selling and were able to do a much better job at being able to forecast ultimate demand. So it was a win-win. So let's talk about these one at a time. So coercive power is the ability to either withdraw resources or terminate a relationship upon failure. So a failure to comply would also mean that the acting body would either withdraw some support or terminate the entire relationship. Coercive power can only be used as a last resort. Because it creates tension in the relationship. It makes the acted on party feel as if their relationship is damaged. Reward power is the ability to provide rewards for positive service or the successful influencing of a strategy. The difficulty with reward power is pretty soon they'll only be doing these things when they get a reward. So you tell your kid, do your homework, you get a cookie. Next day, I did my homework, where's my cookie? This is also the difficulty, of course, when we talk about sales promotions, because what happens with sales promotions ultimately is that you don't buy unless there's a promotion to begin with. Legitimate power is actually two different things. One of them is called legal legitimate power, and the other is called traditional legitimate power. Legal legitimate power is the requirement to comply based upon contracts. And so you comply based on the signed document that you have signed. Traditional legitimate power is the accepted behavior given societal norms. We expect you to be honest. It is expected if we're going to have a long-lasting relationship that you consider me if it is going to impact me. And traditional legitimate and legal legitimate many times can be many things different. Quick story. So when I had my ISP, when Walmart came along and started losing, I dropped from 1,900 customers to 1,500. And I tried to negotiate with Bell South, who was an AT&T merchant, to reduce my contracts, because I couldn't simply own all the phone lines and survive. And they kept pressuring me to pay the bills. And I was under. And I owed about $120,000 at one time. And so in desperation, I went to go see my attorney. His name was Forrest Dan, great guy. Forrest was a circuit judge as well as an attorney. So he was a small town. He handled all that work. And he was my attorney and did all my work free because I gave him free internet, free DSL. And I was at the worst point in my life and I didn't know what to do. And they were going to come around and turn around tomorrow. And then I thought to myself, even if I get out, they're going to chase me forever. And what Forrest said, and you got to remember Forrest, to put this, Forrest was a deacon in the church. Forrest said, Ethel. And he's never said that word to me in my life. Excuse me, he said, David, I wrote the contracts. You don't own anything. You're just a managing partner, all right? If they come and take everything, all they're going to come is take the shelving and that's it, and your equipment. But they can't touch it, all right? And so here's the difference between legal legitimate and traditional legitimate power. Traditionally, they were forcing me or pushing me by societal norms for the expectation I got to pay my bill. Legally, I didn't know a thing. And I could close the shop and walk away. And that's what I did. And that's why I'm here. Okay. So thank you, South Central. Basically, by the way, they went out of business in AT&T bought them. So anyway, expert power. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be vindictive. What?
The nail in the coffin.
You bet. I was happy. I told that guy 2 years from now, you won't be in your business. You'll be somewhere else, and he was. Expert power, you have certain knowledge and expertise. And so you work with this group because you don't have that special knowledge. Now, the difficulty with expert power is your intermediary groups can obtain that knowledge, and then you're out of business. And so you have to be very sparing about the amount of expert power you give out. And that was my big problem as a salesperson, because I used to blab all the time and tell them how to do things, and they'd go buy somewhere cheaper. Not anymore. The last is reference power. And this is when a manufacturer is highly respected and people want to be with them, be part of their group. And so with a name like Big Blue with IBM, I really wanted to be a seller of their goods, and unfortunately I wasn't able to. But referent power is when you want to be with those groups. Now, expert and referent are known as personal power. Those are built within the individual themselves. Coercive, reward, and legitimate, I should say legal legitimate, are what are known as position power. And those are based upon your strength in the organizational structure and whether you're bigger or stronger than they are. So if you read leadership stuff, folks, if you go through any of that, you're going to find power out there. And let me tell you, your success in your careers from now on is your understanding of these. And if you understand this, you might be able to understand your superiors and maybe get to understand what they're doing. All right, we're done. We'll finish up tomorrow. We'll start a little bit on the IMC. And so go have a good day, and I hope you don't get rained on.
I have a couple questions
Yeah.
about the project.
Yes.
Okay, so we picked our case, so now we need to create a presentation that will be due next Tuesday.
That is correct.
And the presentation outline is the one that's on As You Learn.
That's correct.
And then also on the syllabus, we have to write an individual paper about it.
No,
So no individual.
no
papers.
individual papers. I apologize. That should have been gone.
Okay,
Okay, I mean, no, your grade, so we have, the group gets a 93 grade, and the individual gets a 93.
so that means now our presentation is worth 30% of our final grade?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, no problem. We'll talk a little bit more about it now.
Okay, thank you.
PowerPoint with the threats on it.
Thanks, have a good day.